If you thought last year's offseason for the Bills was big, wait till this year. Will Matt Milano be back? What's the position that the Bills need the biggest upgrade for next year? And is Buffalo still chasing Kansas City? That's all coming up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus Podcast.
Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus Podcast. Mike Catalana, Dan Fetes. I'm Jenna Cottrell. All right, Mike, let's get into it. We know Matt Milano is going to be one of the biggest question marks this season. The Bills, do they re-sign him? Do they let him walk? What are your thoughts on Milano and what he's meant to Buffalo, and then now what it could mean possibly going forward?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that's better than they thought he was going to be, right? They drafted him in the 5th round, comes out of BC. And he's been so good. But I think Brandon Beane signaled where we were going here. Because Milano has been so good, somebody's going to want to pay him, and he knows that too. He's going to get a lot of money. So Beane mentioned he deserves his chance at free agency. He also mentioned that he's had injuries, and he has. And there's that point. And then you get into the whole idea of at some point paying Tremaine Edmunds. So I think Milano has earned this right. I think he's going to get that right to go. I think he's going to get paid, and he's not going to be a Bill next year.
Yeah, I think everybody would want Milano back. I just think they'd want him back at a reasonable price tag, and there always seems to be one team that will – it's not fair to say pay him more than what he's worth, but more than what the Bills feel comfortable with at paying him. I think that's what it comes down to. I think this comes down to a numbers game. I think, Brandon Beane said, I've told Matt I want him back, but he's also earned, free agency, like you said, Mike. The problem is that if Matt Milano has only missed 2 games in his career, we wouldn't really be having this discussion. We'd be saying you signed him, no problem, and you've got your 2 linebackers you think for the the cornerstones of your franchise for a couple of years. But he looks like an operation guy. Like you look at all of the different things that he's broken or hurt or sprained and pulled. I mean, it's one thing after another. So, and Mike, we were talking a little bit off camera, a part of another blog, that linebackers are kind of like running backs, like especially at Milano's age at 27, you really don't get 4-5 year deals to these linebackers, right?
He might at this point, only because, he's right in the prime of his career, and this will be the deal you get. My point on that is, he's not a quarterback or a left tackle that could sign 3 of these things. Like, this is his contract.
Yeah.
Like, you get this, you get paid, and then you figure out how long you want to stay in the league. You look through the years at how many guys, linebackers that are 30, that are getting multi-year contracts. Like Ray Lewis did. Like, there's not very many guys that are that way. It just happens. They become 1 year. That's where we're making the comparison on running backs. It's like you get it, you get another deal, and then boom, you are bouncing around. So if you're Matt Milano, man, Jenna, you got to get paid. You got to get paid, and he knows that. So for fans who aren't aware, he is an unrestricted free agent. So that means he doesn't have to do anything. He'll become a free agent. Does he listen to the Bills? Sure. If they all of a sudden said, we got this great deal for you, I think he'd be open to doing it. I just think Brandon Beane's going to sit back. He's going to wait. He's going to wish him well, and he's going to sign somewhere else.
I think I agree with that, because I think it just makes sense in terms of the numbers game.
Yeah, at a scale of 1 to 10, Jenna, how surprised would you be? 10 being shocked, 1 being I saw it coming, if Milano's back?
I would say about a 7, honestly, just because of how tough it's going to be with the cap this year. Just because Milano has played himself into a market of a double-digit contract deal. And the fact that the Bills they're just in a different spot. You have Tremaine Edmunds' contract coming up, what the Bills decide to do with that. You're going to have Josh Allen as well, who's going to have a big contract coming up, which is great. Like, the Bills, it's great to hear that they're looking at making a long-term big deal for Josh Allen. But of course, that means that there's just less money to go around. The cap's coming down. So I would be pretty surprised if he did come back. That being said, though, he has been a huge piece of this Bills defense. And I can understand from the point of, well, it's going to be tight in terms of money, but looking at the upside on the field, because he did battle his injuries this year. He's had hamstring issues, concussions, torn pecs. He broke his leg. Like, there is a list, but it's hard to minimize the impact when he is on the field, the difference that he makes, Mike.
Yeah. So they lost when he played in the Chiefs game, in the AFC Championship game. So obviously it was his fault that they lost the game. I just, you make the good point about Allen and everything else. I was just looking this up, and I should tweet this because I'm not sure people are aware, but Edmunds is only 22. So, they have big plans for him. Most teams wouldn't have a second linebacker that they would even be thinking about these long-term deals, right? Yeah. You pay one guy. And I think they're going to say, Milano's up now. He's older and has had some injuries. Edmunds, I make the joke. I like Tremaine Edmunds, by the way. I say this all the time only because we're going to be saying this for a few more years. He's still young. But they believe they're going to pay him and they're going to give him a big deal. And it's down the line. So they believe that's where they're going to spend their money on linebacker. At least that's the impression I get from Bean.
That's a good point, Mike, because it's so interesting that you have like both Milano and Edmunds in a weird way are both like freaks at a linebacker position. Like Tremaine Edmunds size-wise, he's a freak. Like 6'5", can cover sideline to sideline, all of those things. And Mike, like you've talked about, he has the wingspan, all of those things, Mike. And you've talked about it, that he just doesn't seem like he has necessarily the instincts of covering and kind of filling gaps and reading plays. Like he doesn't have that next level instinct. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the other side where you look at Milano. I just don't know if there's a better coverage linebacker in the NFL. I just don't know how many guys and people, and I'm sure everybody's, watching this going, well, they still couldn't cover tight ends. How come the Bills were so bad at covering tight ends? Like, I don't know who matches up against Kelsey. Like, I just don't know who, like these guys that are just freaks, but I do know that Matt Milano can cover pretty much anybody pretty well. Like, as well as anybody can. I've seen him cover Cooper Kupp in the slot against the Rams. I've seen him do all of these things. And so, Mike, that's such a good point of saying you don't normally have two linebackers that you're going to pay $10+ million to a year on a defense. It just doesn't work. And you already have got money spent in Trey White. You're going to have safety. Like, you got to pay. They're talking about Poyer and Hyde, and again, all of these things. And as we talk about these things, we're talking about stay or go. Some of our Buffalo Plus blogs, like it's a lot easier to look at one position and go like, well, they should just sign him. And it's like, well, it's a big piece. Yeah. It's a big puzzle that you gotta kind of fit.
And that's the thing. It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle, and you have to see what fits, because you can have a great piece, but if it doesn't fit into your puzzle, then you don't have a puzzle.
Here's what fans need to realize a lot of times. You usually only pay one guy at each position. And when I say pay, I mean really pay. Right? You pay one corner big. Mm-hmm. You obviously pay one quarterback. Usually it's one wide receiver who gets big money. Usually. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the case. You mentioned safety, and they've done a pretty good job of managing that. But at a certain point, they're going to look to get younger at safety, I have to say. And as well, those guys have done everything you want. I mean, they're great. I think that they are been the best combo of safeties in the league. Yeah. But at a certain point, it's hard to pay two safeties. It's hard to pay two corners. It's hard to pay two linebackers. You pay maybe, offensive lines, maybe a little different story, because those guys can play forever too. A lot of them can play a lot of years. But I just think if fans sometimes keep that in mind, it's great to have those guys, and you try to mix the salaries in terms of years. Mm-hmm. And if Edmunds was a year young, and when in the league one less year, maybe that's pushed out far enough that you make this work. Yeah. But it's not, because he'll play this year, and then and then it's the fifth year, which is it's where the big money starts.
Well, I think you make a good point too with like having the spaced out contracts, or really when we talked to Brandon Beane last year in Indy at the combine, he spoke about how you kind of want to draft a year before you need that position. Yeah. And I think of, he went out and signed and traded for Stephon Diggs, but he drafted a guy like Gabriel Davis, where now we're not sure what the situation with John Brown will be, but you have a competent guy behind him. Yeah, I mean, realistically, they can move on from John Brown, and it's
What was the deal with John Brown posing in a picture of wearing an Atlanta Falcons jersey? Am I the only one seeing all this social media stuff?
No, I saw that.
Mike, look at you. You're so young.
Yeah, I know.
What?
I'm going, I'm trying to be Brady and go backwards. It's not working.
Little avocado tequila. That was
phenomenal.
Good. phenomenal.
That was fantastic.
Phenomenal.
But no, John Brown's gone. And he's just gone. They're not re-signing him. And I'll see fans who will say, like, I say re-signing him. He still has a year left on his contract. They'll say, well, what if he'll take for lesser money? Yeah, all that's true. I think John Brown loves playing with the Bills. I think that's all fine. But at a point, you drafted Gabe Davis for that reason. You're going to pay Steph Diggs. He's going to be your number one guy that you're paying. And you look to do that. You look to replace those guys. Like you said, Jenna, it was perfectly said, a year early. You know, you bring that guy in, so you're not saying, oh, boy, we draft this guy, he's got to play tomorrow. Yeah, if he does, that's a bonus. Yeah. But it's maybe a year early. So, yeah, I think Brown goes because they can use that money elsewhere.
Well, jumping off of that then, in terms of position groups that need to upgrade, I think, Dan, like tight end is one that there's a couple that stand out, but tight end is among the top.
Well, and it's funny, Mike, in Jenna, you guys made the point of drafting a year earlier, which is why now looking back, like the Bills not drafting a linebacker last year, knowing that Milano would be coming up on this deal. And I know that they wanted to try and work something out before the season. It is a little surprising to me that they didn't have done it, because I look at a guy like AJ Epinesa, where I'm like, they didn't expect him to do much this year. Like when he was drafted in the second round, it was like, what a great value. And then again, he was inactive on the first week. And you're like, what's going on? But it goes back to that thing, like you're saying, Jenna, like before they really knew that drafting before you need to fill something instantly. But what they instantly need to fill is tight end. And whether that's in the first round, whether that is finding somebody in free agency, Bean kind of ripped them apart. Yeah. Kind of ripped Dawson Knox apart, and just saying that it was too inconsistent. So they'll look to upgrade that position. I think last year they really looked to find Josh a true number one, and they did. I don't know. You can't make that big of a splash again. Signing, there's not a tight end like that out there, but whether it's somebody in the first round, they're going to improve that position.
Yeah. I mean, it's, like we said, in terms of what Brandon Beane said about Matt Milano with his injuries, and he's played himself into free agency. He was honest. You're right, Danny. He was pretty honest about the tight end position. They need more. And they want, if you want to watch, we have an entire segment on stay or go for running backs. And we talk about that position and say, I think they're going to look for an explosive player to help them. And if that position is running back and they can use them to catch passes and maybe return kicks and save a roster spot there, all those things. At tight end position, they're looking for a weapon. I think they believe Dawson Knox can still be a good player for them. But they sort of gave him a chance, and he was AJ Epinesa this year.
Yep.
Where he had a few nice moments, made a few plays, made some mistakes. Not the guy you're counting on going, he's in. And, Epinesa is only 1 year. I get it. And this is Dawson's second. But I think they're going to go out. And I think there's going to be some veterans. I've brought the name up Zach Ertz before because I think he can still catch the ball. He's such a good route runner, great team guy. I think they could get him for a limited amount of draft capital if that's what they wanted to do, maybe even push out a pick to next year. And I'm just picking because I know he's the kind of guy who's going to be out there, because Travis Kelce isn't out there. So,
correct.
You're either drafting that guy and hoping he steps right in, which we just talked about, or you're looking for that combination that I think could work.
So you talked about Matt Milano kind of playing out his, overplaying his contract. The Bills, when they spent a 5th round pick on him, they didn't expect him to be making all of a sudden $10+ million. I know Pro Football Focus has kind of talked about it. It fits for me. Jonnu Smith from Tennessee, another guy, 25 years old. He's an unrestricted free agent.
Right.
Explosive kind of tight end guy. He's the one that has shown flashes to take 80-yard, catch and run for 80 yards. I would like something like that, where a guy that has played 4 years in the NFL is kind of starting to peak, is starting to hit his thing. I think that's what they thought Tyler Kroft was going to be, where you're like, hey, we're going to make this guy the guy. And it just didn't work out. Again, an injury, whether he didn't have faith or trust in Allen didn't, they didn't gel right away. But I think that they'll find somebody, and I'm just throwing a name out there like Jonnu Smith.
I mean, I think he developed that chemistry Josh did with Kroft. It was just, it was so hard. He was not out there as much. Yeah. Like the injuries were really tough. But I think what kills me about Dawson Knox is just you see the talent. That's the most frustrating part. Is like you see what type of like the physicality, but it's just those inconsistencies were just jarring. Like some of the plays he would make, you're like, oh my gosh, and then some of the plays he would make, you're like, oh my gosh, like it hit you in your hands, it hit you in your chest. Like what is going on? I don't know if he like overthinks it or what, but what about a guy like now? I think we talked about this a little bit too, of, your locker room can kind of withstand maybe having someone that's a bit of maybe someone that's not exactly the processy. What about like a guy like David Njoku out of Cleveland? Like a player like that the upside is there. There's obviously some concerns in terms of injury and stuff like that, but he's disgruntled leaving Cleveland, but I don't know. I mean, we thought about that with Stephon Diggs. We knew he wasn't exactly happy in Minnesota, and to see where he's at now, I think they're going to look for talent that way. Yeah. I mean, they're gonna look for it, and I do believe you're right, Jen. I think this locker room handles guys. Look, you don't want to bring in a guy who's just going to be miserable. And there was some talk, obviously, about Diggs about that, and he's turned out to be the 180-degree opposite for them this year. But it depends on what you're investing here. When you get Stephon Diggs, you better be right. You give up a number one, the guy makes a lot of money. You expect to sign him to another deal. David Njoku, maybe that is. You're right. I think they're going to be out there looking that way. I think they're going to be looking. And Dan's point about the first round of the draft, you're drafting what, 30th? Mm-hmm. There's guys out there. And there's also, at that position, there's also the guy who played, quarterback at Virginia Tech, who ends up coming to, that's right, the Bills had him. Oh, yeah.
Already.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Surprising.
And he's doing well.
Even like what the Chiefs did. The Chiefs last year drafting Clyde Edwards.
Hilaire. Yeah.
Hilaire. Sorry, I always say it wrong. But he made an immediate impact this year, and he's a dynamic guy, and he's a type of running back that added to that offense.
Hey, you know what I was wondering about that? We talk about these moves you may make at the end of the first round. When you're picking 29, 30, 31, 32, does it make sense to try to get out of that first round?
I think
in terms of the contract, sometimes it looks like a benefit, that fifth-year deal. And maybe it's not so bad at the end of the first round where the number's a little lower.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also a lot of times, like Lamar Jackson or, a Jordan Love or something like that, like where teams want that fifth year. So if you can say, if you want this fifth year, then come up and get it, but it's going to cost you. You kind of say that, like, does Bean and them care about the fifth year?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's up to them to decide.
I think it depends on the player and the position.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, we mentioned the Chiefs a little earlier, but Kansas City, ooh boy, in that Super Bowl, we know it was not the best showing from the Chiefs. But, Dan, does that mean, how does that change, or does that change the Bills chasing the Chiefs now?
It doesn't change anything. And I think that's something that we have with this recency bias of it's the last game. So this is what is going to happen. Like I thought that, it's the one reason that I picked the Bucs. I correctly picked the Bucs. You guys picked the Chiefs. I just want that to be said. That I just didn't think.
I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't cut out there.
Yeah.
But that it's so easy. Everybody's saying, "Oh, the Bucs were the most complete team," and all of this stuff. And are we going to overreact that Patrick Mahomes isn't good? No, he had. And everybody wants to talk about how great the Buccaneers front four was, and they were very good. Yeah. They were also going up against 3 backup linemen, and they were also ahead for most of the game where you could just blitz and just rush and have no worry about the run. Yes, I wrote an article about it last year saying Bills need to get better at rushing the passer. You know what helps rushing the passer? Getting ahead. Look at what teams do. They get more sacks when the other team has to throw the ball and is chasing them, and the team that is winning usually allows less sacks because you're handing the ball off. It's so easy to be like, oh, this is awesome. This happens because of they're just better. There is circumstance into this. So where you look at the Chiefs and you go, guess what? This O-line, the Chiefs O-line is going to be better again. And to sit here and say, well, this is the formula to stop Mahomes. Okay, yeah, you need him on a bum toe. You need him with 3 backup linemen, and you need him to be running for his life. Okay. Yeah, there's the recipe, Mike.
It is. But let me say this. He was playing with two backup linemen for a long time. Okay. His other tackle had been out and it wasn't an issue. He didn't play well in that game. Their offensive line was a mess. I'm not even basically going off of that. I'm saying 3 years in a row, deep into the playoffs, 2 years into the Super Bowl. You paid guys now, and you paid Mahomes, and you're trying to work all these out, and you're keeping older players. I think the Chiefs are still immensely talented.
Yeah.
But next year is the year they take a step back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they take a 100%
step back. Agree.
And a step back means they're not the unequivocal number one team during
Correct.
the year. And they may have one of those years where they're like 11-5, and they lose a few they shouldn't. And, guys, because guys are getting older and they've paid them. I mean, Tyreek Hill is a mismatch nightmare. Kelsey's going to be 33 next year. He's been around, he's getting a little bit older. And again, they've paid guys on that team. So it starts to change, and it's a lot of games, and it's a lot of minutes, and it's a lot of getting ready. And I just think the Patriots are such an outlier in history of a team
so is
that
Brady.
Kept going back. Yes, and Brady. Even though Brady had a long stretch there where he didn't make the Super Bowl, and it was like a big deal. But in terms of it, it's hard to do this year in and year out. And the only reason I say is it it's still the Chiefs. They've been in the AFC title game 3 years in a row, won the Super Bowl once, made another one. But I think it's more for the Bills. Don't look behind you. Somebody's gaining on you. Because I think the AFC's a monster next year again. And Herbert's a year older. And Burrow gets a full season. And all those things.
Where did Sean Watson go?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll see what happens. And Miami starts thinking like the Bills did this year. They make one big move.
Yep.
They believe that. Watch out for them. So
I
think it becomes more congested at the top of the AFC.
Yeah, I agree.
And like I say, you talk about Brady, that he's just such an anomaly of, the Super Bowls, and, he has more Super Bowls than any other franchise in the NFL. Yeah. But he's the anomaly that just doesn't decline. And eventually Father Time, I think, is going to beat him. It's not yet. But you look at some of these other teams that have, not necessarily fallen off the cliff, but like Aaron Rodgers is so good, but his team doesn't constantly. This is the first time he hosted a championship game. Like pieces get injured, things like that happen. Yeah. Players don't play as well. Like a lot. I'm not saying it's always this linear decline. Sometimes it's a cliff. Sometimes
it's a lot of times with those teams that are perpetually back, the powerhouses. Like you don't see the decline before it happens. Like you kind of are like, it might happen. And then it just
but here's what happens. Here's what happens where look, even like Seattle took a little step back, and then, Green Bay, and, when they've got the quarterback, you've always got the quarterback, but the team isn't quite right. And look, even the Bucs, like a lot of things went their way and everybody says, oh, this is what you do. Tom just brings in a bunch of old guys. Look, TB 12 pack isn't going to do this every year. Like he had a great year and everything came together. But in their playoff run, New Orleans handed them things. Green Bay was dumb. Like, this is what it took to get there. They were not the best team during the year. They weren't at all. Yes. And it came together, and it did. Neither of these teams are going to be in the Super Bowl next year. Mark the tape, whatever it is you want to say. They aren't going back next year. They're not. Neither one is going to be in the Super Bowl next year. Dan, you better not disagree with me. You disagree, don't you?
Heard it here.
I don't know. That's a hot take.
Yeah.
No, neither one's going back. Neither one's going back. There's no rematches in the Super Bowl, by the way.
I'm not saying Cowboys. You're saying both. You're saying neither. Yeah,
neither one's going to be back next year. Kansas City made it the last 2 years, and you could make an argument. Even that Cleveland game with an injury, anything can happen. With one break for Cleveland knocks them off. The year before, they were down 20 in both the other games.
Yeah,
and they survived. Natural, it'll come back to earth next year for them. And Tampa's Tampa. Tom will have a better regular season starting out, and then they'll be good, but they're not going to the Super Bowl. There you go. It's my hot take.
I like it.
I mean, I will say, I think while, Dan, you make the point of how the Chiefs' offensive line was banged up and Patrick Mahomes was running for his life, and usually it's a stronger unit, but I think it does say a lot about the Bills' need to get pressure, because maybe they don't get maybe it's not sacks, but just at least getting pressure on the quarterback and seeing a guy like Patrick Mahomes, like he is human.
Yep.
That throws off the timing he has with his receivers. Like there's just so many more positive, impactful things that can come of it, as opposed to just letting Patrick Mahomes take his time, sit back in the pocket, or any quarterback be able to make all their throws. That was one thing that I was like, I think that shows that, well, again, it's not saying that those will be the same circumstances a year from now. It shows how
I get it.
that piece is.
Well, yeah, and every team wants an Aaron Donald, and when the Rams do,
of course.
I'm just like that was always the thing, right, Mike? When Brady's lost in the Super Bowl, it was because the front four got pressure, and it's the old adage of you can stop the run and then run the ball and don't like there are things that like every team wants to do. Not every team does it. Do teams do it in spurts? Yeah, but again, I think they tried to retool this defensive line last year with Mario Addison and Quentin Jefferson and Epinesa being a year away. I think they tried to do it. I don't know if they really got all that they wanted. Obviously, Jenna, you talked about on a previous podcast. Ed Oliver really wasn't up to par with what we thought. He didn't improve. And while defensive tackles aren't going to get pretty stats, like they want him to be Aaron Donald like. They want him to get that pressure up the middle. And then again, you have to be addressing Jerry Hughes.
And I was going to say, and Starr's back next year.
Well, I was about to say that. I'm curious how much that will impact Ed Oliver.
I think it helps him.
It does.
I think it absolutely helps him. But I'm curious how much that impacted him this year, and why maybe that is a reasoning to why he struggled. Not even struggled, but like wasn't what we expected. So maybe next year with Starr being back, he can eat up those blocks, and it can be more of Ed Oliver and the Ed Oliver show.
I think Starr was missed more than he was appreciated. I think at his age, having a healthy year off is an odd thing to have.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, while I'm sure he missed being there because it was such a great season, I think he comes back and gives them what will be probably his last year with the Bills, but I think he gives them a lot of what they need, and I think it will help Oliver. And I think that guy is a blocker eater. Like they're going to have to block him.
Also, imagine the beating your body has taken for 8-9 years and having a full year off to recover.
Yeah, and I got to go back to making sure I spell Latulale correctly because we all got a year off of that. I know.
So last year we always talked about the Bills needed to get more pressure and more sacks on the quarterback, and it's a tough stat to kind of track with pressures and all of these things and disrupting things. Last year the Bills were 6th in the league in sacks per game. They had 3 sacks per game. This year they were 15th. And again, you're replacing Shaq. You're replacing Jordan Phillips, who had what? Jordan Phillips had what? 10 sacks, 10, 11 sacks last year? Like things like that. Like I think there was, there was a new defensive line coach. A lot of things happened. I wonder how much the pandemic and no real training camp and no real preseason played into that and all of those things. I agree, Jenna, that pressure is going to be a key moving forward.
Yeah.
I just also think the more you have of being a good offensive team also kind of dictates.
Well, they were this year. And let's be honest, it wasn't just numbers. They didn't get great pressure on quarterbacks. They were not the team that was, it's a good thing Jerry will be back because Jerry gets pressure. I said, clone him, put Gary on the other side. You'll be all set. Jerry and Gary going after QBs next year. By the way, I tried the line. It wasn't my line. What's better, Tom versus Tequila or TB 12-pack?
I like Tom versus Tequila.
Tom versus Tequila was good.
That's my drink of choice.
Tom Brady has never been more likable than being escorted drunk out of off
truly. Oh, it's
truly
funny.
Isn't that a drink too? Was that what he was
probably
drinking?
had one of those or a couple of those.
We've all been there, and that's what is so relatable about Tom Brady.
I saw that great tweet. It was a picture of Brady, Gronk, and Arians, and it said homecoming as a freshman, as a senior, and as a graduate, or an alum. And it's just so perfect.
That's hilarious.
It's so perfect. By the way, did I mention they're not going back to the Super Bowl next year?
Yeah, you said that.
They're going to be on the victory tour. They're talking about they're doing what the same dumb stuff the Eagles did after they won a Super Bowl. Talking so much crap. Like, it's not going to happen. They're not going back. Sorry.
All right. Well,
good for them. They're throwing their Lombardis around, but
I'm more happy to hear that the Chiefs won't be.
They're not going back.
Expecting the Chiefs to go back. And also, we know that Patrick Mahomes does not subscribe to the TB12 method. He eats way too much ketchup, which has tomatoes, so that we know that doesn't work.
Too much sugar.
Yeah.
Too much sugar.
Maybe Brady is changing now. He's just going to be a wild man. He's Florida man now that he's in Tampa.
That is funny.
It's like Stanley from The Office when he goes down to Florida.
That's it.
Florida Stanley.
All right, we're going to wrap up here. We'll have plenty more on buffaloplus.com and our YouTube page. We have the stay or go, which Dan talked about, just like looking at position group by position group. And then we also have rating the rookies on buffaloplus.com, just our breakdown of the rookies and their performance this season. And plenty more, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For Mike Catalana and Dan Fetes, I am Jenna Cottrell. We will catch you next week as we talk more Bills offseason and the preparations the Bills must do, because Brandon Beane, we know, has a bunch of decisions to make ahead.